Hello and welcome to the fifth edition of Global Youth Interview Series. I'm Devamal, and in today's episode, we'll be talking about the New Space Policy of 2020. The New Space Policy of 2020, which was announced by the government last month, envisions to bring a major reform in India's space arena by allowing the private sector to carry out space activities like building rockets, satellites, and providing launch services. The Space Policy and the Space Activities Bill will help us address the legal issues in the strategic sector. Today, to discuss on this, we have Dr. Rajagopalan. She's a distinguished fellow and head Nuclear and Space Policy Initiative, Observer Research Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today, madam.
So now we'll begin up with our first question. Ma'am, ISRO has some unparalleled achievements to its name. For instance, the Mars Orbital Mission, commonly known as MOM, or GSLV Mk3 launch. Then why do you think we need the new space policy 2020?
So first of all, thank you for having me. And I think this is a great forum led by a lot of young women. So I'm particularly pleased to be part of this conversation. But I think that's a fantastic question because India's space program has been one of the most successful ventures that we have seen, especially considering that we have institutions like the Defense Research and Development Organization, which is another public sector unit that's not been as successful. There are successful cases. A lot of the missiles that come from developed by the Defense Research and Development Organization or the DRDO is a case in point. But India's space program, run by this state agency, the Indian Space Research Organization, has been one of the more spectacular ones, one of the rare public sector institutions that has worked so well, that has done India so proud in terms of, like you said, the Mangalyaan, the Mars mission, which is one of the rarest occasions because that is India's first attempt, and India managed to get it right the first time. We were the first Asian country to do so. So there are a lot of firsts sort of accomplished through that mission also. And of course, GSLV Mk3, again, that's a proud moment for the Indian scientific community, but also for the rest of the country because, again, the cryogenic engine for that was indigenously developed. So there are a lot of major accomplishments when it comes to India's space program, and the credit goes to ISRO entirely and the Department of Space. But I think time has come for us to debate on the growing set of requirements for the country. India's space program today is not just about peaceful pursuit of space, that is civilian application, or India's space program is not just for the social and economic development of the country. That was the case when until a few years ago, because initially when we began the program in the late 60s and early 70s, we were a relatively poor country, a developing country, and we didn't have those kind of resources to splurge on a space program. So our leaders at that point of time, both within the space community but also the political leadership, were very clear that we will pursue the space program in pursuit to better the lives of our people. So I think that was the sole objective in that sense. But I think today the time has come because, one, I think this is part of a natural sort of a logical next step for any country that has invested in a space program for these many decades. It's been a few decades now, so it's a natural progression, natural next logical step for India to kind of spread out and kind of develop other capabilities, as well as pursue more space exploration missions, whether it is Chandrayaan, the moon mission, or the Mars mission, or India is also planning a mission to the Venus. So there are a lot of pure space exploration missions that are also being undertaken by Indian Space Agency. But I think more than that, I think that there is also the growing set of requirements from the security and defense related requirements that are becoming. But space is also being increasingly used for broadcasting, television and broadcasting, broadband services, weather-based weather applications, and so on. So the number of applications that space is being used today has grown enormously. So the overall demands on the ISRO to develop the space power is pretty quite significant. And ISRO has capacity deficit. ISRO so far has been able to deliver, but I think it is just about doing that. And I think therefore, I think there is a need to engage the larger community outside there, and you also need to engage the private sector, for instance, because of the growing set of requirements and ISRO's capacity deficit within the ISRO. It has to engage other parties as well. And especially when you talk about engaging the private sector and so on and so forth, you have to have a clear policy framework. You have to have clear regulations in place. Otherwise, it is going to be very difficult to determine what are the various parameters under which you will consider a particular private sector to play a role or not. So I think, especially because space is expanding, the role and functions of space in India's case are expanding, we need to engage other partners which call for clear policy and regulatory framework. So I think that is the primary motivation for India to debate a space policy. Having said that, I think this has been a debate that's been going on for very long. So I think it's time that we put something in place in that sense.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Also, you said about defense, so I had this very spontaneous question that in this current time of current tensions between India and China, taking into consideration that space sector today is said to be the fourth arm of defense. Now, supposedly, if the tensions escalate at the border, then is India really prepared with this fourth arm?
I think, yeah, that's a $1 million question in a sense. I think, of course, India's requirements in the, like I said, the space requirements in the defense and security sector have been growing for a few years now. In 2013, for instance, we launched the first dedicated military satellite for the Indian Navy, which was for maritime communications. But even prior to that, we have been using satellites, what we call the dual-use satellites. That is, satellites with both civilian utilities as well as that can be used for defense applications and so on and so forth. So, for instance, if a satellite is able to capture an image of a particular area, but the image quality, if that is particularly good, then it is useful not just for land survey or mapping of various areas, but it can also be used for to survey a particular area in a conflict zone and so on and so forth. So I think the defense requirements have been growing, especially for ISR, what you call the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So the ISR requirements of space-based ISR have been growing for a very long time, and these have been more or less accepted across the board everywhere. Most of the major militaries today use space for their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance activities. But I think we are also growing beyond that in terms of establishing communications through space-based assets. You also have space for being used for what you call the PNT, precision navigation and timing sort of functions. So there are a whole range of operations that you're looking at. How much India is integrated into this? I think we are still quite some way before. We do use for ISR purposes space in a big way, but have we integrated space in an active fashion in our military operations? I don't think we are there as yet. We use them, but at the same time, but I think it's still some way to develop in a sense. I think there are, like I said, capacity deficit to the point where the Indian Army, for instance, has demanded in the past that they should have their own kind of launching capabilities, and that they should have their own infrastructure. They should be able to decide what are their various requirements, and based on that, they should be able to have their own separate launch facilities and so on and so forth. But I think ISRO has had certain amount of autonomy, and that they have enjoyed so far, catering to the entire demand of the country in a sense. And so there is certain amount of resistance or unwillingness to part with and share the space with somebody else as well. And I think that that resistance has been there for very long. and that is nothing unique to the Indian case, or even for the ISRO. The same goes for the Department of Atomic Energy, which is responsible for India's nuclear weapon program. Again, they enjoy certain amount of exclusivity to to them, and they find it very difficult to sort of share the space with somebody else. So when the U.S.-India nuclear deal was being negotiated a few years ago, this was part of the consideration. The DAE did not want to let go of it and open up the sector to other players, both the domestic private sector, but also international players to take part in India's nuclear program. So I think these are certain institutional practices and habits that they have developed. They have all the autonomy. They enjoy certain amount of access and freedom and everything, and they don't want to share the space. They don't want to lose that sense of autonomy in a sense.
Okay, thank you so much, madam. So now we'll proceed with the next question. With a shoestring budget of less than $2 billion, ISRO is well known for its cost compression ability.
Yeah.
Now, how do you think this ability will be impacted with the advent of public-private partnership in space sector?
I absolutely agree. I think India has had a very tight budget when it comes to space, but it has managed pretty well so far. And if you ask any ISRO scientist, they will never say that they are short on money, they are short on funds, that they will never agree to it. But the reality is that, especially with the growing set of requirements, that limited amount of money, the money has not been expanding for this. So the funds for the ISRO has not been really increasing over the years. So you have the same small kitty that is still available, but your requirements have been growing. So essentially your funds are spread so thinly across a growing number of requirements to be met, in a sense. So there is always going to be that problem, in a sense. You're not able to focus adequately on your security set of requirements, or maybe your broadband and broadcasting requirements, or your weather forecasting, agricultural issues, or telecommunication, telemedicine, teleagriculture. So a whole range of requirements are there, and yet your kitty remains the same. The requirements have grown, but your economic funds that are available has remained the same. That cannot really be the case. So you have to bring in private sector to play a role. And I would say here, some of the private sector players are capable. They have the economic wherewithal to contribute to India's economic space program. But some of the smaller players, or the new space enterprises, the startups, for instance, when they come in, they really don't have all the funds that are required to play an active role. So in that particular case, the Indian government has to really dole out some of the money, some of the funds that are required especially for the new space companies to make an impression in the space arena. But there are more capable players, small and medium-sized enterprises, or even slightly larger players. For instance, some of the larger players like the Larsen and Toubro, L&T, or the Godrej, or Walton Nagar Industries. All of them are the big tier, the top level players, and they have been working with ISRO for a very long time. But I believe that, again, time has come for them to assume a more independent role, so that they can contribute to the Indian space program in a more autonomous, more independent, effective manner. For instance, if there is a set of requirements, the ISRO can come out with saying that, okay, these are the kind of requirements we have now, and these are the kind of capabilities that we need to build. Leave it to the private sector how they build those capabilities. Let there be an open competition. Let there be an open field, and give them a level playing field, so that the private sector can also compete and kind of contribute to the Indian space program. Rather than, because currently, or until now, the ISRO has followed a very different model. For instance, ISRO has engaged all of these three big industries that I talked about, the Godrej and the L&T. L&T has been one of the bigger players, in a sense, as well as Walton Nagar. But what they have essentially done is, ISRO would say, okay, this is, they have been mostly contributing to India's PSLV program, the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. In fact, something to the tune of 70% of the PSLV program is outsourced and are done by the L&T and the Godrej and other companies. So in a sense, they have the capability outside, but ISRO has generally followed an outsourcing model. So this is a capacity we don't have in-house. So I will give out this to you, you build it for me. That's it. The private sector is not given a free field to say, okay, these are the kind of capabilities that we need to have, India needs to have in this particular sector, or so and so capabilities that are required in the telecommunication sector, so and so on the military and security set of sectors. Instead, ISRO has so far come out with very specific requirements saying, we don't have this, you provide us with this. So that outsourcing model has worked okay, all right for now, but I think we need to move past that and create a level playing field for the private sector to engage as an independent, effective player. Look at the case of NASA. The US space program, for instance. NASA is a space agency, a state space agency, but NASA engages a range of private sector players, yet NASA's importance as the space player has never been taken away. So ISRO has to, in that sense, be more confident in creating space for other private sector players, so they can also actively contribute to India's space program in a sense.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. So our next question deals with a sense of caution. Like, for instance, the arrival of the private sector into the space arena of the nation has also instilled a sense of caution into the minds of public, as well as the few experts in the field also, as they consider space to be a very sensitive and critical issue. Now, what is your say on this?
So sure, space, nuclear, all of these are really sensitive issues, but I think they're also extremely, when you look at their overall utilities, they're also dual use technologies. That is, they have huge amount of applications in the civilian sector, and also there are utilities in the military sector or the security sector in a sense. So there are sort of, given the dual use nature of some of these technologies, I would say you need to engage the private sector, at least in the areas that are not as sensitive. For instance, why should the ISRO be launching the satellites? The routine satellite launches. Why should the ISRO be doing it? ISRO's name itself, the Indian Space Research Organizations, it's pure. It's actually mandate is to do a lot of scientific research and pursue pure space exploration and those kind of missions. To launch routine missions is not part of its mandate, really. So especially when it comes to the launch of those regular routine missions, satellite communication satellites and kind of things, I would say we need to part those launches, for instance, to the private sector. And I think ISRO has begun to acknowledge this. So I think back in a few years ago, ISRO started, I think sometime in 2015 or 2016 is when first ISRO started talking about the need to privatize the PSLV program. So essentially giving out to, initially they came out with a statement that the ISRO's PSLV program will be run by the L&T, the Larsen & Toubro. But then there were there were a lot of complaints as to why L&T is being favored and so on and so forth. So thereafter, ISRO took a decision that it will be a conglomerate, a group of companies that will be running the manufacturing as well as running the India's PSLV program, and that's a terrific decision. But my issue is that, okay, fine, you have taken a fantastic decision to part with the PSLV manufacturing as well as the launch to the private sector. That's a terrific decision. But to implement that decision, it is still not being done. We are still looking at maybe 2021 or 2022 is when actually I think by 2021, we are kind of looking at it that ISRO, the private sector will be finally taking off the PSLV program completely and running it on their own in a sense. But it has taken so many years. It's been like at least 7 years before from the time we took an initial decision, in principle decision, that PSLV needs to be given away to the private sector. So similarly, there are a whole range of other options with developing certain technology. And when you engage the private sector, other countries have been doing this. like I said, I gave the example of the US. Again, they have been dealing with a lot of sensitive technologies as well, sensitive areas, even within space. But that has not stopped them from engaging the private sector. That is number one. And even in the case of Asian countries, take the case of Japan, for instance. Japan has, again, an active participation of its private sector in its space program. So other countries are also dealing with the same set of issues that India is also dealing with. It. So it's not, and so you can, there is also another way to do this. For instance, those companies or individuals who want to be part of the Indian space programs, a new space, or even bigger players who want to be part of India space program, you can give security clearances, for instance. That is a practice that has been generally followed in the US, for instance, mostly in terms of undertaking certain studies, certain national security related studies, and so on and so forth. There are individuals as well as institutions that are given security clearances so that they are bound by, if they are given certain classified material and so on and so forth, they are not supposed to be. They are supposed to be extremely discreet with it, not part with others, and so on and so forth in a free fashion. So there are different ways you can do this. You can engage the private sector at sort of don't disclose the entire. Nobody is talking about giving away the national security secrets to your private sector because you engage. But so I think you need to find a right balance, and I think that's where the regulatory framework becomes a lot more important. What kind of regulations will you put into place if a private sector is to be engaged? So if you can find the right balance in terms of giving them the space, yet have certain regulations that will also restrain or restrict certain activities from these companies to engage in, I think there are ways to do it. So I don't think just because it is a relatively sensitive area and high-end technologies that you need to be extremely concerned about. And the general assumption is that private sector, they are not, they are purely run by commercial profit generation, profit motives, and that they may not be patriotic enough, and so on and so forth. I think that's a very lazy assumption or a lazy excuse, I would say. I think we need to find ways, innovative ways to engage the private sector if we have to grow in the sector. Because if India has to get even a fair share of the global commercial space market, India has to improve its competitiveness. Otherwise, we are not going to go very far.
Okay, so thank you, ma'am. Our next question is regarding the decoupling the entire role of ISRO. For instance, the new space policy intends to decouple the regulatory, compliance, and service delivery role of ISRO, something of which you just pointed out. So, what are the potential outcomes of the same?
Of course, this has been something. This has been a demand in the making for a very long time. A lot of the policy analysts who have been writing about these issues have highlighted this time and again to say that it's not a healthy practice for one single institution to have three or four different roles sort of combined in them. In a sense, it's not a healthy practice. For instance, the same goes for the in many ways for some of the other sectors like the atomic energy too. Partly you cannot be the promoter and the regulator of the technology. In a sense, you need to have compartmentalization. You've got to have separation of division of labor, separation out of some of the roles and responsibilities in a clear fashion, and that has to come through a parliamentary legislation. That's the ideal way to go about, and I think that's a route that we are taking. It's I would think that there will be some resistance from the ISRO, of course, because that is, in a sense, you are curtailing their certain roles,
Right.
in a sense that they're not going to be particularly happy about it. But when the finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, made the initial announcements in May this year, ISRO was not particularly enthusiastic about it. It came out with a very tweet saying that, okay, we will work with the government in whatever, so on and so forth.
Right.
But they were not the most enthusiastic that, yeah, our powers are going to be taken away, or our roles are going to be
Right.
minimized, and so on and so forth. So they are not going to be the most happy about it. But I think they also recognize that you need to expand the domain, you need to expand the field to bring in other actors, and the role has to be clearly, especially as India's space program grows bigger and bigger, you need those clear separation of roles and responsibilities. Otherwise, all combined into one, I think for instance, you have Antrix. Antrix was established in 1992 as the ISRO's commercial arm, so to say. It has been a bit silent in the recent years, but you have a new institution that came about last year called the NSIL, the New Space India Limited, which is essentially a sort of a go between the ISRO and the private sector. So it will do some sort of a hand holding of the new players, the new private sector companies that want to engage, and so on and so forth. So partner with the private sector to transfer some of the technologies, especially when it comes to small satellite launch vehicle, and of course the PSLV, and so on and so forth. So there is an effort, there is a clear recognition within the ISRO also that that they can't be running the program on their own completely, because they are not able to meet the growing set of requirements. That is one. Second, as to why India needs to step up its activities in this regard is to get a fair share of the global market or regional market, because India has one of the cheapest launching facilities. In a sense, we launch satellite, the launch cost per satellite launch cost is one of the cheapest in the world, in a sense. Even other companies like the SpaceX, for instance, they can't compete with India because India's PSLV, for instance, launching not very heavy payloads, but we have certain cost advantages, as well as we offer credible launches. So in a sense, if we have to take advantage of a commercial space market so that we expand and increase the number of launches for other countries, and that also becomes part of your revenue. So you need to step up that. So it gives you influence, it gives you revenue, and it increases your presence overall. But unless India steps up its its competitiveness in terms of the ability to launch more satellites per year, we are going to be losing the market to China, as well as to other private sector players who are entering the domain.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. It seems your answers and my questions have a beautiful sync, sort of sync. My next question is on NSET itself. Dr.
Okay.
K. Sivan, in a press conference on 25th June 2020, highlighted the need of NSET to be demand-driven and not supply-driven. So how do you think is this going to affect the private players' experience in this entirely new space age?
No, absolutely. I think Dr. Shivan is absolutely right, because you cannot have a set of companies develop technologies or a particular system just because they can. I think it has always need to be tied to the kind of demands that you have, in a sense. So it is always going to be demand driven, rather than just because they can supply certain technologies, certain systems. They should not just produce in abundance, but instead they need to be in tune with the kind of growth. What are the set of requirements? What are the kind of demands from various sectors, and accordingly develop those technologies and systems. Having said that, my one point, I think, which is always I've been trying to make, is that the private sector, for them, it cannot be just the ISRO or just the Indian Armed Forces who can be their customers. You need to have a larger customer base, because when they are investing a great deal of money, putting in money there to develop engaged in R&D, the research and development of various systems, technologies, and so on and so forth, they need to make some money elsewhere. They are not doing a charity business, right? So there needs to be certain incentive for them to engage, expand the kind of their customer base. So there, I believe that I think it's important for private sector to be able to sort of supply some of the products that they make to also to other countries, other players around the world as well.
Okay, so thank you, ma'am.
With this, we have come to the last question of the day. Government also announced the formalization of our new geospatial policy to allow local entrepreneurs to use remote sensing data of the country's satellite. How do you think it would electrify the space community?
I think this has been sort of a demand for a very long time as to how this policy will play out. And I think these are areas that ISRO and the government as a whole need to think about in more serious terms. Because even, for instance, when you look at the a few sector-specific policies that India has, satellite communication, SATCOM policy we have, the remote sensing policy we have, geospatial. These have not been particularly elaborative enough or the detailed enough to kind of be an effective tool for to expand the number of people who are able to use it and so on and so forth. So there are serious issues with it, with the kind of policies, sector-specific policies as well. This also, let me take the opportunity since we are talking about peer policy. I think there is a clear need for India to spell out a comprehensive space policy that is all encompassing. So it should not be just about geospatial aspects or the SATCOM policy or some other aspect or the military space policy, but there has to be an overarching comprehensive space policy of India as to where India plans to be by 2030 or 2040, and accordingly what India plans to do within the space realm within each of the smaller segments in a sense. And that clarity, that articulation has not been there so far. But I think this has been, again, there has been a demand for such a policy for a very long time. And I believe India has been making such a policy for quite some time, because when I go to speak to military institutions, for instance, they keep telling me that they have passed on their feedback to the government in terms of what how the policy should be tweaked and so on and so forth. But again, we haven't seen such a policy. And I believe that ISRO cannot come out with such a overarching comprehensive space policy, because ISRO is India's civil space agency, which means that they can only talk about the civil space aspects of India's space program. They cannot talk about the military segment, military utilization of India's space program, and so on and so forth. So therefore, I believe India's comprehensive overarching space policy should be announced either from the Prime Minister's office or by the Parliament of India, or even the Ministry of External Affairs can come out with an overarching space policy. But ISRO, if it comes out with a space policy, it is always going to be limited to the civilian aspects of India's space program, because if they talk about military space program, there could be sharper reaction to negative reaction to India, how India may be pursuing, ISRO may be pursuing non-civil applications, and that might hinder ISRO's international cooperation with other partners and so on and so forth. So I can see the logic from ISRO's perspective as to why they would want to focus only on the civilian aspects of India's space program. But I think the need for a comprehensive space policy is very, very clear, and therefore it has to come from one of the other arms. Having said that, I think there is also a clear requirement for India to spell out the military space policy. India conducted its first anti-satellite test last year in March 2019. Right after the test, I think the Indian National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, talked about having a space doctrine, just like the nuclear doctrine that we have in place. There is value, there is merit to that, but I think space is somewhat unrelated in that sense to nuclear. You cannot have a sort of NFU policy, a no first use policy kind of. You can have NFU policy, but space is not something. ASAT capability, for instance, is anti-satellite capabilities are so destabilizing in its nature that you cannot think of operationalizing the ASAT capability. It is more as a deterrent capabilities. It is to stop somebody else from messing around with your satellites. It's not a capability that needs to be operationalized. So far, 3 other countries have demonstrated the capability. You have US, Russia, and China. None of the countries have operationalized their anti-satellite capabilities, and that's a good thing. And I don't want us to be the first one to go and operationalize the capability and truly weaponize outer space in that sense and make it inaccessible for future generations, because it will affect, if we go down that path, there will be a lot many more developments in the area of weaponization of space, which is not good. Which is not good from a perspective of safe, secure, and sustainable use of outer space in the longer term.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am.
With this, we have come to the end of today's interview. On behalf of Global Youth, I would like to extend my warm regards to Dr. Rajagopalan for giving us your valuable time and sharing with us and our audience valuable insight into the space policy of 2020. Thank you so much, ma'am.